Hi, I'm Peter Brock and welcome to 25 years. 25 years since we first got that bright idea to start HDT special vehicles. Can't believe it. Probably showed a lot of people that, hey, you can do things. Enjoy the show.
Peter Brock had already established himself as a driver of great talent throughout the 1970s. And when John Shepherd took over the reins from the retired Harry Firth, Brock was once again driving for the Holden dealer team. However, things would change when Holden withdrew their unofficial support, and the team soon came up for sale. Vin Keane, a prominent dealer from South Australia, along with Warren Smith and a few others, put forward the idea that Brock build a series of modified Commodores for the road, to be sold exclusively through a network of more than 50 dealers that supported the race team.
I love cars, you see, but I love tinkering with cars, and I was always building up my own special versions of a road car anyway. If I had a car from General Motors, and I've been fortunate enough to have road cars from them supplied since the early 70s. The first thing I'd ever do with that car when I got it off them, which was say a GTS Monaro, was lower it, wheels, tyres, extractors, cam, heads, and these were company cars. But that's what we did. And so, you know, Peter Brock always had the fastest company car, but we'd customise them. We'd be always putting, paint outs on them, or a spoiler or something like that. And so I took to it like a duck to water, and I'd been doing it for some years beforehand because I loved making cars go harder.
With much enthusiasm surrounding the project, finance was immediately arranged. The deal was done, and in December 1979, Brock became the new owner of the Holden dealer team. The birth of HDT special vehicles would follow, and a new era in performance motoring was created, which couldn't have evolved at a better time.
It was a rather curious situation harking back to 1980 because there was a real crisis, energy crisis. The price of crude had gone through the roof. There's a general feeling out there of lack of confidence, a malaise, I think is the word, in the auto industry. And there were some proactive people though at Holden who thought, look, we've got to do something. And part of that was really getting stuck into the 1979 Around Australia trial, which Commodores finished 1, 2, 3 outright. So that sort of established Commodore as a brand, and it also said to the rest of the world, hang on, let's have a positive approach to where the industry is and driving in general. Let's get a bit of fun back into motoring.
HDT would go on to produce some classic muscle cars over the next 8 years and beyond, with the first car, the VC HDT, making its debut in late 1980. To help get things started, Vin Keane donated a light blue VB Commodore to be used as the prototype.
The beginning of how we went to arrive at the specs we did, and how we did the prototype work, when we were young and we were just sort of like into it, and no one had told us we didn't know how to do it. We just sort of like, show me a car, let's hot her up. Incidentally, when it arrived, it was a 253 cubic inch motor with an M20 gearbox and the wrong diff ratio. We changed the diff ratio, we put an M21 gearbox in, we put a 5 litre motor in, we put a Lighten flywheel on, the L34 flywheel, and we did all the bits and pieces of the engine we wanted. But it was still, it wasn't ready. And I'd been talking to Bruce Nowacki, who ran the race team for us in those days, and he said, Brock, you've got to fit on big valve heads. We've got to have L34 type heads on it. Now obviously we couldn't fit the L34 head as it was produced, but we did have the option of putting the L34 porting onto an emission cylinder head with its exhaust gas recirculation ports and all sorts of stuff like that, but we could still make it a lot better than what it was. We also knew that the rules and regulations meant that you needed a very nice opening onto the manifold so you could put Webers and stuff like that on it. So we machined all that area. We wanted to get some better performance out of the engine, so we changed the ignition advance curve. We reckoned that there was a problem that the engine lacked fuel pressure when it got hot, and we found this in our race program. So we fitted what was called the L34 fuel pump, which was about 3 or 4 psi greater than the original one. We lagged some fuel lines, we did some stuff like that, and it meant that it started to get up and go. So the car evolved from this 253 manual through to this 308 manual with those mechanical bits and pieces. And I remember going over to General Motors Parts and Accessories over in Dandenong one day, and I was just sort of over there looking at some sort of better air cleaner, because this air cleaner didn't look too fancy to me. It was a hole about that big, and I thought, engine can't breathe through that. I don't care how many scientific analysis you can give me, they just can't work. So I was walking around the spare parts bins trying to find out a way of just doing something with the air cleaner. And I walked past this big aisleway, and here was a stack of air cleaners up there. And they were big air cleaners. And I said, what are they? They said, oh, they suit the Chevy Silverado utes we brought out. I said, they got a quadrijet? Yeah. I said, let's grab one. Let's chuck it on. He said, won't fit. Can't fit. I said, oh, let's grab it. So we grabbed one, took it out of spare parts, one arm. I walked out with one of the heavies, walked out the back, popped the hood on this car, removed the air cleaner, had a bit of a look and thought, it won't fit on that angle because the carburetor configuration was a little bit different from one to the other. So I went, twist her around that way. Okay. Lined her up, sat it back down on the gasket, said, okay, let's see if the bonnet closes. We were there looking and saying, the bonnet will never close. It will not close on that. Look at it. Bang. How good's that? So I said, right, let's try this thing out. I must say, we wanted to fit extractors, but engineering would not let us. They said, no. Extractors will rust out. You can't have them. Well, we know now that extractors don't rust out. They're pretty damn good. But once we got that car going with that big air cleaner, etc., it was a very, very quick car. It got up and went, and it just absolutely creamed the standard car.
I remember the engines would be delivered by truck, and they were forklifted off, and luckily the road was very wide, and we just parked them in the parking bays in the centre of the road. And I'd borrowed a forklift from a friend of mine, we then forklift them on pallets up into this area where we're working, and the proprietor, I could see him in his office from time to time as I was driving the forklift up with these great big wide pallets with about 8 or 10 engines on it, in between the Ferraris and the Mercedes-Benz, just with a couple of inches to spare on either side. And he would just go on,
Unlike some of the previous performance sedans and two-doors, the VC HDT Commodore was based on the top-range SLE and came with a host of luxury features. To further complement this, HDT fitted a driver's footrest, Momo 4-spoke steering wheel featuring the vehicle's unique build number, and the manual cars also received a wooden gear knob.
There was no doubt that the SLE was a bit of a risk, really. And I'd have to say that the main reason that the SLE was chosen as a basis was because of the influence of Vin Keane from, the big Holden dealer in South Australia, Laurie Sutton, probably Reg Hunt, a couple of those sorts of guys. Old Stage has been around for a while. And they thought that it was wise to position the car a little bit differently, to put it in against the imports. We were all in love with Commodore, new car, and we thought this car's quiet and smooth and all that sort of stuff. So we had the luxury interior. We had that nice red colour, that velour, brush velour sort of finish, which looked pretty classy. And it looked pretty good to this day, really.
Well, the Monaros were not a luxury car, nor was the XU1s, but the VC SLE Commodore was a top-of-range car for its time. It had the velour upholstery, the V8 motor, power windows, cruise, the works on it.
And it could fit in with the area that probably the West German companies of that time were building, with BMW particularly, Mercs, etc. The BMW is sort of like seen as being a bit of a performance car. And we figured, look, you could make a Commodore fit that sort of part of the market. So the SLE was the basis. It was, therefore was going to be expensive. It's going to be stacked with luxury items for the time. And I sat back then and said, well, okay, you know the market. If we're going to make them limited production, if they're going to go for the luxury part of it, luxury sports part of the market, it'll probably work. They just wanted to separate it from the taxi cabs and stuff like that. That was as simple as that.
The decision was to build 500 cars, but working out of a small factory and trying to build 500 cars presented its own unique set of problems. HDT would move premises 3 times over the coming years as its production schedule increased.
The idea was 500 from the word go. I don't know, 500 was the number we built with L34s, 500 with A9X. I think there was more with XU1 and the earlier Monaros. Maybe some of the Monaros were 500 there as a variant. But 500 was like the magic number that everyone thought would fit the Australian market. It's a certain size, and I think in a specialty car market you can get too greedy. And you can decide to be all things for all people, and people lose that sense that they're buying a bit of, special collectible type of bit of machinery. So 500 fitted in fine, and 500 doesn't sound much, but if you were to imagine that you had a little factory you'd sort of hired, and you did a deal with a landlord, and you wanted to park a few cars here and everything else, and dealers were screaming for cars, and you had to get them through at a certain rate. 500 becomes quite a few. All of a sudden you've got 20 or 30 cars sitting there in the street with parking officers running up and down trying to book these unregistered cars and stuff like that, which is another story altogether.
Oh, we used to have horrible problems in
the parking inspectors.
With these parking inspectors.
Yeah, so you had to get them all out to get to work. You had 15 cars backed up, and you can't have them in the workshop, so they've got to go out in the street.
So they got room to work.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you book an unregistered car with no rego plates? What are you going to do? Book the tag number? I don't know how you do it, but we had this ongoing issue with the parking people.
So that's when I started making licence plates, like my dad always told me I would, and just hung the same number on about a dozen different cars.
Oh, we had
inspectors were
one,
going nuts.
We had one trade plate at the time, and
Yeah, I just copied it 10 times.
we just needed the same number 10 times because you couldn't park an unregistered car out in Leveson Street, North
Well,
Melbourne.
we did.
Well, we did, but then the parking cop said, look, we can't book them because they're not registered. So we just made up an extra few trade plates with the same number, and okay, they're registered now officially, sort of semi-officially, but we had a running battle with parking cops there for years.
Even with your own personal vehicle, you park it out, you got 3 hours. So every now and again you're going, oh, Jesus, hang on, drop everything, run outside.
And we had to eventually just sit down with them and say, look, this is what we're trying to do, and let's call a truce. Let's sort of try and figure out a way of doing it. And in the end, we ended up with eventually we finished up with a pretty good relationship with them.
The VC HDT styling gave the car a much more aggressive look over the standard Commodore, with its A9X style wheel arch flares, front head amp and large rear deck spoiler. Although the prototype was blue and build 001 was green, the cars would be produced in just 3 colours: Palais White, Firethorn Red and Tuxedo Black, most of which featured a distinctive red, white and black stripe treatment across the lower front and sides of the car.
The reason we went with red, white and black was very simple. They were Holden dealer teams racing colours. That's the colours we used. We had the HDT colours, I think, had been locked in for probably the previous 10 years. So that was our race colours. Styling wise, there's a gentleman called Leo Pruno, and he loved Commodores, and he loved the whole idea of motorsport. And he was a bit of a rebel, a bit of a renegade, wanted to do things. He reckoned that the organisation kept on stopping him, so he had little projects. So he started doing some clay work, and his original idea was that he was going to build, he was making the panel work for the yet to be released race car. And the race car version was like pretty exaggerated fender flares and pretty exaggerated front spoiler. But what he looked at was to come back with a street version of what the race car looked like. His whole idea was, let's make the street car really have a lot of the styling elements of the race car. And he and I had a lot of meetings, a lot of chat up because he knew where I came from and we just loved it.
When it came to the body fit and finish, every fine detail had to be just right. All fitted body pieces underwent both mechanical and visual inspections before the cars were ready to be shipped off for delivery.
Probably the biggest hold-up was the rear deck spoiler, which would have ripples in it. And because we chose a lot of black cars, because of the prestige angle, etc., we had to get that rear deck right. We really do.
By the time you lift up the guards and then you put the actual die moulds on, I suppose, to verify whether the holes are going to be drilled, and you check them with the flares, and then you drill the holes, and gee, how many people can go drilling half a dozen or a couple of dozen holes in a brand new car? Oh,
Yeah,
it's a brand new
it's
Commodore
really
SLE.
spooky the first time, yeah.
Drill a few holes.
It was spooky the
And then
first
you put
time.
the
They give you a
flares on.
template
Yes.
and you just mark it out and start drilling and you're going into a brand new car. Once you were good, you could do one a day, depending on the colour. You know, the red ones took longer because you had to fill in and hand paint. The black ones are cool if there's any gaps you couldn't see them because it was black on black. And the white ones, the little bog, you used to squeeze them as the same colour, so you could just...
Phil Brockett's still taking them over the North Melbourne railway lines at about 140 k's with 5 pleat wind to make sure the tyres didn't hit the flares. And
No,
okay, no one's going to complain about that one. Nothing hit.
Yeah, it did. I used to come back with little black rubber marks down the fiberglass. How the hell did you manage that? You know, because you'd taken it out yourself 10 minutes before and you couldn't put a scratch on it. And come back with all these black marks and you'd be out cutting those pieces out.
Get off there, paint that up, touch that up.
Unbelievable.
Naturally, you couldn't build a performance car for the road without looking at the suspension. This was another area of the car that received considerable research and development from Peter and the team at HDT Special Vehicles.
When I'd done the Round Australia trial, I realised that you could get a lot out of the suspension by putting quality gas shocks on and stuff like that. And we put Bilsteins on because we'd used it in the Round Australia trial. We knew they worked pretty well. However, at that time, we needed a big fat tyre. And I thought, okay, we need sort of some, 15 by 7 or whatever the wheels were. And I reckon this big 225 tyre will go on there. A lot of people thought it wouldn't work. They thought the wheel tyre combination was going to be too big, and like this little Commodore, we've never had a tyre on like that, and There was a certain feeling that it wouldn't be stable or ride properly, etc. But once we built the prototype and got it running, I think we used Simmons wheels for the initial car we built. Just got a set of wheels made, you know, to suit. Put a set of Bilsteins in, changed the springs slightly. I think we used a heavy-duty spring and we squashed it.
Germany company Irmscher produced the 15 by 7 inch road wheels for the VC Commodore. These wheels would also be used in the VH series, as well as the first of the VKs, the LM5000.
Look, the Irmscher wheel just jumped out in front of me. I thought, this is the wheel I've got to have. I thought it looked very much the aero look that I wanted the car to have, like a flush-looking wheel. And, you know, in that era, I mean, a Commodore was a very, very sleek car, and with its rear deck spoiler and everything else, you put a set of these Irmscher wheels on, looked pretty hot. So that's how the Irmscher wheel came out. It was the same diameter, the same width as the prototype wheels that we'd used, which were just a local, you know, aftermarket wheel, and with the big tyres on, etc., the car took on a totally different stance. So it took a long time to get this car right. I can assure you that anyone who's built special vehicles will know that one of the bugbears is getting your panel fit and finish right, having the parts there on time and having them blemish free.
HDT Commodore was an absolute huge success, so there was obviously a huge market out there. They were thirsty for a performance car, particularly with the HDT image and Peter Brock's name, and huge success. The dealers were happy, Holden were happy, everyone was happy.
As part of a promotional idea, HDT supplied 12 VC Commodores for a one-make celebrity race referred to as the Race of Champions, held at Calder Park in November of 1980. The two-race event featured Peter Brock behind the wheel of Car 7, as well as several local and international drivers. Each of the 12 cars were built to normal HDT specifications, with the exception of a half-roll cage. Due to time constraints, the steering wheels were hand-numbered with SV and the car's designation. These cars were an addition to the normal run of 500 and would later be sold off to the public through HDT's network of dealers.
John Rock was probably one of the main instigators of this. He thought that if we could get a race going, it would work out pretty good.
Well, those 12 cars were built to, I guess you could say, compete in a celebrity type event at one of the Australian Grand Prix that Bob Jane held at Calder, which brought into the country some of the world's top Grand Prix drivers.
But the idea was, let's sort of get out there and launch this car, a bit of oomph. So we had a meeting with Bob Jane and put on a race. And we sent out invitations to various people, and it turned out that everyone wanted to go on the race. We had some Formula One type blokes out there, and we didn't think twice about it, you know, just throwing the damn cars and roaring around and tearing mudguards and headlights off them and stuff like they normally do. They treated them with total disdain. I mean, here we are. We didn't even want to drop the clutch and sort of chirp up the wheels, because when you're the manufacturer of these cars, like, you don't want to spend any more money, reckon, you know, stuff you've got to fix it up again before you can sell it. So we were treating these cars with kid gloves. This is like our staff guys who owned them. But when we put it in the hands of people like Rob Luck, a journo who supposedly was taking this car out for a nice little drive in the countryside, he brought it back with the brake pads, you know, disintegrated. The tyres had dripped off the tyre rims, you know, off the rims and everything else. I mean, we sat back and said, oh no, journos, what are they doing to our cars, you know? But that was part of the promotional process. We had no money. None. We had an operating budget of basically zero. We just sort of did it. But that sort of suited everyone, because we could deliver a car out here and there'd be dealers screaming for cars, you know, must have it, must have it. We'd get a car off to them, you know, and then another one and then another one. And pretty soon the production schedule ramped up like that. Now, with things like the Race of Champions and with the general word of mouth that gets around about a new car, it was pretty hot and everyone liked it, and the press were taking this thing on board. I guess it'd be fair to say that the public demand increased at the same rate that the actual volume of cars were produced. If we'd have put them all on the market just like that, I don't know where the Race of Champions activity would have fitted in as far as creating that sort of appetite for the cars. Did it make any difference to sales? I don't know. Sometimes when you're involved in marketing and promotion, you realise that sometimes you're selling the sizzle, not the sausage, as I say, you know. So you're sort of creating a bit of a mystique, bit of a ethos as to what these cars are all about and what they'll do. So the fact they're on the racetrack, running around there and going pretty quick, I might add, probably added very much to the fact that hey, these cars are a sporty car.
That particular race, I don't know that we can measure. The sales. It's very hard with an event like that to actually measure how that affected sales. It certainly helped the image and then made a lot more people aware of what Peter was doing with HDT special vehicles and those cars. And when you think about it, that was a celebrity race, was probably one of the first as well.
After the last VC was produced, a void in production was left while the new model was being developed. It was during this period that the Australian Dealer Pack, or ADP, was created. In addition, this period also saw the development of some of the lesser-known HDT special vehicles.
At the time, we did build some other vehicles, ones and twos and half a dozen. I think there was some wagons we did. The wagon market wasn't all that big for us, and it just didn't seem to fit into the sporting image of HDT. Although, the people that bought them loved them, and they loved the performance, but it was a pretty limited market, and I don't remember how many we built, but it wasn't huge numbers. The last of the HDT VCs was delivered in around about June 81. We then had a period of 9 months before the next model would be introduced, and so during that period we built some one-off cars. We also were involved with a Jackaroo, which are very limited numbers, but there was one project that Peter and myself were very, very excited about, and that was the Gemini. Peter had noticed that in Japan that car had a twin cam engine available, which was fuel injection, 5-speed transmission, magnificent engine, and decided to do an HDT Gemini. So we got a Gemini, got all the prototype parts, all production parts flown out from Japan, and we did the whole lot: suspension, wheels, fitted the engine so that it could be done in production, and the interior and all the cosmetics and so on. It took some time to get this car built and perfected, but at the end it was just magnificent. It was a great performance car. Now, obviously our direction was Commodore, but this was a Holden product which we thought would just be sensational. There'd be people around that would just love a small car like this with such great performance. However, we had to show it to Holden, and so at the appropriate time we rang to speak with John Rock, who was the then marketing director, and John Loveridge, who was the marketing manager for Australia. Both of whom were very tall men, very tall. John Rock was 6'6", and John Loveridge was about the same height, but John Rock was a big man. So anyway, we took the car down to the office. I'll never forget this. One evening, about Friday night, they said, "Hey, yeah, bring it down. We'd love to have a look at it and a drive in it." So down we go. We pull up out the front. Down they come and they look at it and walked around it, and we opened the bonnet and they said, "Oh, geez, it's just wonderful, beautiful car." We said, "Why don't you take it for a drive?" And they said, "Love to." There was only one problem: neither of them could fit in it. They just simply could not fit in it. They were too big, and with the seats in it, we had the nice, competition type seats, which were beautifully trimmed and so on, and it may have been a limited adjustment, but nevertheless, they couldn't fit in it. And that is where that project stopped, right there and then on the footpath outside General Motors.
The ADP was created simply because we couldn't get Holden to build the basic cars we needed. We couldn't get the limited production build cars through, and we were going through from an era of 500 identical cars over here, and then that might start and finish within, say, 3 months, maybe less. And then we've had a few other bits and pieces coming through based on SLEs, but the dealers were saying, "We need a car now. We need something that's just going to, like bread and butter. We need some of your cars," and we needed it as well. We had cash flow, and we had to look at how do you sustain the interest that you've created in your business out there. How do you sustain it? Well, let's create some packs that fit onto existing cars that don't require Holden to press the button and build a special base vehicle.
What you have to remember is that the HDT group of dealers were limited and wasn't available to every dealer in Australia. The dealers that weren't involved in the arrangement with HDT special vehicles were anxious to have access to some accessories or components that we could provide for the general customers with Commodores. And so that's basically where the Australian dealer pack originated, for that purpose and for that market.
He said, can you come in and do some of these dealer packs? And oh, what's that? Same as a VC. They were SLEs, and it was basically the same guards, the same everything, the same front air dome, same rear deck, but it was just, baby poo brown and blue, all these different colours that we'd never worked on before, so that was a whole other learning process as well.
If we could get it to be some police spec, which was what we did, we put a police spec on a stock SL, or whatever they were, that would turn up in whatever colour it was, and we could turn it into a pretty good car, turn it into basically a Group 3. So that was a matter of just getting the computer program, finding out what computer program we needed to be lining up with, getting the dealer to press that code, and lo and behold, we had ourselves a pretty good car. So that's what an ADP was.
When the main VH model was finally released, it was initially available in just Marinello Red and was based on Holden's 4.2-litre SS Commodore. Unlike the VC, the VH model now came in 3 levels of specification: the SS Group 1, SS Group 2 and the full house SS Group 3, which was the only model available with the 5-litre engine. The 5-litre Group 3 would later prove to be by far the most popular choice with buyers. The 5-litre engine was also made available in a high-output version, although very few of these would be produced.
The VH model, we initially did red, and red's always been a popular car with sports cars and sports sedans, and once again I think we learned the lesson of some colours sell better than others, and you're not really sure until you put them on the market, so we went with red.
The 4.2 was very much GM marketing. They wanted to try and promote that 4.2 and get that out in the market. So we built a few. We thought, well, the 4.2s ran pretty hard. They weren't slow. You put them out there against the stopwatch with the 5-litre, they weren't shabby at all. But there was, again, it was a bit like the lower spec cars. People said, nah, if I'm going to buy a V8, I'm going to have the 5-litre. I want the Mumbo. I want something that gets up and goes. I want something that can tear the doors off those Fords when I go, meet them on the street.
Once again, Leo Pruneau was responsible for the design of the vehicle, but the VH's styling was quite different to that of the VC. The Group 3 featured the most styling additions with its new fly-through rear deck spoiler, rear apron and rearward-facing bonnet bulge. The wheel arch flares were replaced with a set of side skirts and rear door spats.
When we walked into that studio and Leo showed me what he had, I remember to this day going in there after work, about 5 o'clock, 5:30, and Leo'd say, Peter, I'll drop in later on. So he wanted me to drop in later on because he didn't want Chuck Chapman to know what was going on. In fact, he had these walls that you could pull up in the middle of the studio. To this day this thing happens, I suppose. And inside there was this Group 3 sitting there. And I can tell you, without any fear of retribution, Chuck Chapman came in there, walked around there, was guided with all these other things which were probably the more boring part of the motoring world, with new windscreen wiper blades to suit something, or I don't know, a new seat, fabric or something. And he went around there and he did not know this car sat there within about 10 feet of where he was standing. So when I went down there only a few minutes later, ta-da, we pull the walls apart and there it is, this gleaming looking rocket ship that sat there with these splitters on and the little Z28 type rear deck spoiler and everything else. It was the first of the flow-through rear decks and everything else that we'd had in Australia. It was it. It was fabulous. It was just a great thing. And that car looked hot. And Leo would have to take credit for that. He had a nice sharp look about it all. And to this day you see a nice VH Group 3 and they are a good looking car, there's no doubt about it. Particularly, we were always trying to make them lower And somehow they'd finish up higher, and we get lower, lower, we want them lower. But they look real good, yeah. And the reasoning, quite simply for that, was Leo had looked at some of the styling elements that probably BMW have been using, and some stuff from the States. I mentioned the Z28 rear deck spoiler, that's a little bits and pieces in it. That was his vision about how he'd like to see a hot car.
Another distinctive Leo Pernod design initiative for the VH was the front fender mounted wind splitters, a bold design for its time and originally a classic design feature of the VH. They would also carry over into the VK series, but by this time were only an optional feature.
And those bloody splitters, they were a nightmare. God, I'm telling
I
you.
went splitters down the front of the guard.
Those little rubber things, trying to get those straight, you'd look up and like a boxer's nose, and it's been super glued down, you're trying to chisel it off and dig the hole and put a new one on there, and yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare.
Well, you're supposed to put them on straight to start with.
Yeah, I know, but they never went straight.
Yes, they
things
did.
like that, mine never did.
Everybody liked it. I mean, I liked the look of it. From a technical point of view, if it had any effect aerodynamically or any other advantage, I'm not sure that it did. It's one of those things sometimes in the business of making cars, visual appeal is very important, and that worked very well and was very popular.
Well, the specs were based on the racing program that we had, where group was like a word that we were using a lot. If you looked at homologation and stuff like that, I don't know where I got it from, but it came out of my head somewhere, that Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, and we came up with a spec. I mean, Leo loved that whole idea of the different specs, because we thought you got a standard SS and then you got one with a bit more and a bit more. The Group 1 and Group 2 situation didn't really work. It was okay in theory, but people wanted one with a lot to go. That's it. I said, that's the one. It looks hot. And I think they also thought that in terms of collectability, that it was going to not only give them the reward as a driver, but probably the reward later on that they've got a car here which has got, it's got all the fruit.
The Group 1, that was basically gave you, I think, a bit of suspension, a steering wheel, a sound system, and that was about it. Group 2, then you get into the Bilstein suspension rather than the Munro suspension, and a few other sway bars and a few other mods as well. And the Group 3, of course, that gave you the full body kit, that gave you the engine mods, that gave you all the rest of the stuff. So you had levels, not so much to get rid of the cars because we knew people would buy them, but more so to give people more choice if they couldn't aspire to an SLE necessarily, for something full house, but they still wanted something to been through HDT.
Engine development took place at our race team. We would do some dyno work with the modifications that we'd develop. In some cases it could be intake manifold, exhaust system, and we worked in conjunction with the suppliers, and if we saw an increase in torque and top end, we were happy, obviously, and but you were limited once again with ADR requirements. The cars had to be ADR'd and conform with noise levels and emissions and so on. One of the innovations, I guess, which helped performance was the use of extractors against the cast iron headers that were used as standard.
And that was like, but finally, we got it through the system. And from memory, I probably had to personally lay down my life to General Motors to say, if ever an exhaust system fails, I will personally pay for it or something like that. But that overcame that bogey. And the reason we overcame it is because I had been a little adventurous early on and allowed the extractors to be fitted as an option, or if a dealer absolutely positively must have a set of extractors on, we said, well, we'll do it. But you've got to understand that you've got to take the car with the cast iron headers, or take the cast iron headers fitted to the car and there's the extractors in the boot. So that's how we started off doing it.
I guess one of the highlights for our owners of having that sort of exhaust system, a tubular exhaust system, is when they opened the bonnet and showed their HDT car off to their mates. It just looked more racy, and it looked, the engine compartment looked fuller than having those standard cast iron exhaust. VH engine development and suspension development was conducted by our staff, and particularly Peter. I mean, Peter's name was on the car. He had to be happy with engine performance and obviously suspension performance, and he would develop the suspension with our engineers to a level that he was happy with. And when I say he was happy with it, he was conscious of the fact that we weren't actually building racing cars for the road, but they had to have that sporting flavour and performance. And of course you had to work within the parameters of Holden.
I think the major difference between suspension, VC to VH, we used a station wagon rear spring, which was squashed. It was a heavier back spring, and it gave it less rear roll, and that meant its lateral adhesion was slightly higher because it wasn't getting roll oversteer, it was sitting flatter. So that's basically what we did. I think we changed it also. We put a smaller rear stabiliser bar on. We had the VC had a fairly thick one, I think it was 20 mil, and I think you'll find that the later one was either 18 or 16 mil. It was quite a lot smaller, maybe 14 mil. It was quite smaller, but the spring was a lot harder. So it was more of a performance-oriented car, I guess.
Tyres and wheels also came into the equation, and so that was all developed. And when Peter, as I said, signed off, but I mean he didn't sign off on it alone. He would get myself to drive the car, get my opinions, and some other key people, engineers. In a lot of cases we drove the cars on the road. Sometimes if we felt that the need was required, we'd take it to a racetrack and just try it out there. One of the features of the VH on introduction was we'd painted out the bright work on the windows and so on. And I guess I have to say we'd looked at that early and took a punt. Made a decision. We thought the bright work, the chrome surrounds on drip rails and window frames and everything was sort of going back to the 50s, a bit old-fashioned, and it didn't fit in with what we saw as the image of the sporting type cars. And I think that was a huge success because there was many other companies followed in later periods, but that was basically the feeling. It was more sporty to have the paint out, and we liked the look of it, and obviously our customers did too.
We had colour-coded headlight covers and all sorts of things back in those days. We tried anything, but then the police said, no, we don't like them.
Yeah, we used to spray up the rear lights. You'd mask them up with masking tape and just highlight the little black thin strip. And it used to take you half an hour to get the masking tape and see all the gaps, and then somebody complained about they actually couldn't see the brake lights, and about half as effectively as they were before because of the black lines.
We even painted things behind the grille. I don't know if people noticed this, but we didn't like those silvery pipes and that going to the air conditioning. We used to drive Leo crazy. He used to drive me crazy. I'd say, no, just get a pressure pack on. We want it to look right, because details everything when you're making a car look good.
The reverse opening bonnet scoop was also another popular creation. It basically gave the car the muscle car look, and that's what we were looking for at that stage. And the other thing I could say, I guess it was a throwback from the A9X hatchbacks, which had that style of bonnet scoop on it, and that was always popular with those people, and certainly looked very well looked terrific on our race cars, and so that was the image we were looking for, and it worked.
But I was looking at these VH Group 3s. They are quick cars, I'll tell you. But I looked at them, I thought, all red. I'm getting sick of red. I'm over it. I want something else, so I'll build a white one. So I got a white SL, and I turned it into a full-blown car. And I have a feeling that was the car that I eventually had as my own car. And I think I remember selling that car to champion VFL football player by the name of Peter Dacos, with my race engine and the whole thing in it from a race series I'd taken part in over in New Zealand. Anyway, I built the car, this white one up, just prior to getting all these bits and pieces. I built the white car up as a full Group 3. And I rang up Rob McIntyre, who was doing the marketing stuff down there for Holden at that time. And I said, well, I want to look at these cars. I want to build a few white ones. He said, oh, white? What are you going to do that for? Red, mate, red. I said, no, just white ones. He said, look, I said, I'll come down at lunchtime and show you the car. That's how it worked in those days. Yeah, so I just drove down there, parked the car at the front somewhere, and went inside and had a chat. And I said, yeah, look at these. I want to do some white ones. Just expand it a bit, you know. He said, yeah, you really reckon? Will white work? I said, well, look at the front, see what you reckon. You got one? I said, yeah, built one up. Have a look. So he walked out the front, sort of white car, and it did look bloody good. And he took one look. I said, I see what you mean. Let's do it. Done. And we turned around. He didn't even walk down the steps. I mean, he just stood there and went, wow, that looks hot. He said, done, done.
Customer feedback and a desire to further improve the cars saw several new options introduced to the VH series of HDT Commodores. These included an upgrade from 15-inch to 16-inch road wheels and sport seats, to name just a few.
The option list on the later VHs, I guess, was a result of feedback from our customers, but particularly car club people. We had a very good relationship with car club people around the country. I mean, they were the people buying our cars and we were interested to talk to them. Some of the options that we introduced were the seats. Seats have always been a little bit of a problem with cars, in that everybody wants the seat to suit themselves, and of course all body shapes are different, and it's very hard to please everybody all of the time.
Stratos seats, again, that was another Charisma Auto Accessories sort of deal. They said, sports seats, what have we got? So we started looking at those seats, the Stratos seats, and introduced them. The central wheels, we wanted 16s. And from memory, Charisma they were looking at it, and they reckoned Momo could make some wheels for us. But at the time, the only wheel they had in 16s was the Mercedes-Benz spec wheel, which we had machined by Ron Harrop Engineering to suit the Holden hub, and that's where that central wheel came from. But it was the first of the 16s. And from memory, we fitted some Pirelli P0s, the first low-profile 16s in the country, and that's what we went off and running with. I had a fabulous relationship with Holden in those days. There was no ceremony, there was no politics. They just used to look at it and think, Brock's doing all this stuff here and it's working out great. So we just used to just trust each other, and he'd look at that and think, yep, done. I always worked on the basis, both with a sponsor or with dealing with Holden, that if you gave them an example of what it is you were talking about, something you touch and feel and look at, and you'd get the level of enthusiasm and passion sort of flowing, and the dealers could look at it, that was the best way. I still believe that to this day, the best way of ensuring that your new project was going to sort of get legs. We just wanted to try and create, a new level of spec, if you like, that people look at and say, hang on, you guys are the real deal. You've got, all the bases covered. And that, of course, eventually changed to Shield seats, who made a seat for us, ADR approved seats, etc. And then we had the Momo wheels, and Bridgestone came on board with their OE spec sort of tyres, and we've really grown up with that era.
A project not originally considered by HDT was the WB Magnum, which ultimately became the most popular HDT vehicle not based on the Commodore platform. Based on the Statesman DeVille or Caprice, this was a big luxury car with a new level of performance and handling courtesy of HDT special vehicles. Featuring no body modifications, the car still had the HDT visual makeover, with blacked out windows, body-coloured mouldings and new Momo Polaris wheels. Although not all cars received these visual enhancements.
When it came time to do the Mighty Magnum, Ross McKenzie rang me, who was then the sales manager of Holden, and I think Crennan was the marketing manager. And they said, yeah, well, look, we're trying to get something happening here because the WB's sort of like in run out. And there's not much, we're able to build them for another year or something, and we've got to try and excite some sort of sales thing here. Can you do something with it? I said, too right. So they shot out I think it was a chocolate brown car from memory, and we looked at that and thought, okay, Group 3 heads, Group 3 exhaust, Group 3 carburettor stuff and air cleaner stuff, bit of a snorkel that fitted over here. Got on a Bilstein, set of shocks, set of springs, fatter front bar, I think about the same rear. We looked to see what the wheels and tyres. We had a small amount of wheels which were a Momo wheel they had, which was like a flush looking wheel. It looked pretty good. And also we changed the diff ratio. I think we put a 308 instead of a 278 or something like that.
Got about 50 statesmen out there. As soon as GM announced the demise of the statesman, all of a sudden we had about 50 or 60 of the things turn up. We turned them all into Magnum. So hang on, we've got the yacht club out there we've got to deal with. All the chrome had to come off the statesmans, and I think it was 257 pieces, I think, at last count.
When we did all that, the car, we painted bumper bars and did all some, graphics. It went hard. I remember going out to Calder, and the best I could do with a stock Statesman was something like 61.5 seconds on a lap. And as soon as we went out there, we whacked the Magnum out there with its new, I think they had Pirelli P600s on that car. We were down in the 57 dead. It was just like a weapon. And it was only 2 seconds a lap slower than the actual Commodore around that track. So we thought, geez, the big Stady gets up and goes.
Would have been nice to talk him into a 5-speed Statesman Magnum, though.
Oh, yeah.
I was halfway there.
Yeah, everything opens.
So we're putting the 5-speeds in the Group A. It's the same engine. All we have to do is find like a manual Monaro console or something, and we can put the 5-speed into a Statesman. That'd be real fly then. Yeah. Because you'd probably find a buyer for it. Because, even if you did one off and see how it went and tested people's reaction, because even the first Magnums, for a Statesman, for a very heavy car running all the pollution equipment, they were still very, very quick cars.
Yeah.
I think they were about a half a second a lap. I think Peter got one around Calder about half a second a lap slower than he used to get the Almonaros around. And that for a street registered, street driven, what people thought was a yacht back in those days. So it's amazing what you can do with some Bilsteins and some good springs.
Bloody stable yacht.
We did 3 utilities that I'm aware of. It wasn't a ongoing model at the time, and we did do specific cars sometimes for customers who come up with an idea they wanted specific work done on the car, which is out of our normal model range, and sometimes in between production models we did work like that.
So that was a great success. I think we probably built, 250 or something like that. I don't know how many exactly. Someone would probably remind me of that, but I think it was quite a good seller. And the car itself was just a terrific car to drive. I mean, I love those big Statesmen. Get back there, just cruise along,
That car was a huge success, although once again it was in limited numbers. But point to point is one of the best cars I've ever driven. That car just handled so well at high speed. It was well balanced front to rear because of the reduced trim height and the wheel and tyre package. It just had a really good footprint on the road. It just had the right amount of understeer, and you could really drive it hard and fast. And it's just magnificent to be able to drive a luxury car at that speed in complete comfort and complete safety. It was just sensational.
The loan of an Opel Monza during an overseas trip to Germany sparked the idea for a European-style two-door V8 for the Australian market. The Monza was a beautifully styled coupe, given the Aussie makeover by HDT Special Vehicles. Featuring the Group 3 spec 5-litre V8, independent rear suspension and 5-speed transmission, the car had huge potential, but would ultimately never make it into production.
We were given a Monza, which was the 6-cylinder version, a standard car in Germany at Russelheim, and we took off when we were driving on the autobahns. And the car would do 235k easy, and we were pretty happy with this, being able to get on the freeway and go flat out. And it was quite comfortable. It was a lovely car to drive. I was a navigator for Peter because we had a couple of places to go to. We were in Germany and it started to rain. So you're driving at 235k or thereabouts. Lots of spray obviously from the vehicles ahead. I've got the Melways, so to speak. I don't know what they called it over there, but the road map. And of course a lot of the road signs and exit signs were hyphenated. So I'm trying to work out which is the exit, and a couple of times we went by the exit at 235 and Peter jumping up and down yelling, "Why didn't you see that? That's where we had to turn left." And I said, "Well, I couldn't see it, and you were going too fast, we didn't have time, so we have to go down the road, get off the next exit and do a U-turn, get lost, get back there." And
The Monza was a walk-up start, really. I was over at Richelheim looking at what they were doing, and I kept on looking at this two-door coupe, saying, gee, this is a good market, this is the one, we should be doing it.
But we got talking about that, and Peter obviously said, wouldn't this car be great with a V8? This would be sensational, and I agreed with him. It was a good-looking car, shades of the 8-on-X Tirana, the hatchback type car. Beautiful suspension, interior features were wonderful, and we looked at the engine bay and it looked to us like it had been made for a V8.
And I spoke to the production people and I realised that we could get that car off with its fuel tank and with its trim, and it had a steering column in it, and had bits and pieces like that. We could get up to a certain point on the assembly line as it swung around and get it down there and straight on that ground, and I could buy it like that for, I think it was something like 12,000 Australian dollars as a partly finished car. And I could buy it through spare parts. So I was arranging to buy that car through spare parts, as a spare part, and just come to a special arrangement for them on the price margins and everything else, and we were cooking with gas. Bumper bars, headlights, had all the electrics, wiring loom, the whole lot in the car. So, keeping that in mind, I got a complete car. I think it was colour was anthracite.
When Peter had brought that Monza in, we figured, well, this is the way to go. Well, he did. I was really going along for the ride here. It was a very enjoyable ride, but it was fascinating to see it unfold.
We did a lot to it because, keep in mind, we had to pull all the steering system out. All the radiator system out, the engine and transmission. There was a lot of stuff we had to integrate, such as the brake master cylinders, everything else. They were all Aussie. All that stuff was Australian. But we did our homework and we worked it out. That car could be on the market for something like $30,000, and I think that was dealer margins and everything else. So it was very much a goer. And everyone was going to make money out of that car, and we thought, well, let's build 500 cars.
Anyway, so we finally got the car finished, and the performance was sensational. It looked fantastic. It was just one of the best things we'd ever done. It was just a sensational car.
I remember we were moving from North Melbourne to Port Melbourne, and he said, maybe come for a drive with me in this car, right? So we jumped in at North Melbourne and we drove to Port Melbourne. That section of road, in a very short space, we accelerated to 160k and then slowed down. And I was amazed that I'd actually travelled 160 kilometres per hour in the middle of the city. I don't think you can get booked for that, 20 years after the fact.
If we could have got that car into production, we would have sold heaps. It would have been expensive, but at that particular time, for the type of performance sedans, although it's a hatchback, but for performance sedans that were around, it would outperform most, just about everything.
Why it didn't happen is Holden just, I don't know if they lacked the vision or the foresight or what, I don't know. I can't answer that. All I know is that we built the car, drove around it was a fabulous car. It probably sits there as an example of what could have been if someone down there had the, the foresight to say, well, this is going to enhance the brand and it's going to, I suppose, be a flagship for what Australians can do. Maybe it was because it was a Peter Brock idea, maybe it was because it was a showing the rest of the manufacturing process up in a poor light because they couldn't capitalise on it. I don't know. You'd really have to ask Holden why they chose not to, but I just loved the whole idea. I had no agenda whatsoever other than, what a great idea, let's build it.
The VK series made its debut in the latter half of 1984. And while still based on the VB platform, the car's styling continued to evolve. Styling changes included a new design treatment around the rear quarter glass area, plastic bumpers in place of chrome, and the relocation of the number plate, just to name a few. Furthermore, Alabaster White and Marinello Red were replaced with Alpine White and Asteroid Silver. Several new names were also introduced to the lineup, with familiar names as SS Group 3 being retained. Styling changes aside, the most noticeable development was the decision of Holden to cease production of the 4.2 litre V8.
The LM LM5000 was basically the first of the VK series.
The LM came from Le Mans, because we'd been over there running at Le Mans. We'd sort of just, the name, we just thought, oh, LM5000. It was like a celebration, if you like, the fact we'd been over there roaring around.
The LM5000 retained the Irmscher rims used in the VC and VH Commodores, but were given a polished finish this time. Being an interim model before the release of the SS and Group 3, many styling features such as the wind splitters and boot spoiler were simply carried over from the previous models.
It's fair to say that the reason you would look at white and silver is they're nice, sporty colours. So you can make a car look very nice with white and proper graphics. White and chrome or something shiny always looks sharp. It's clean, nice, and I think anyone who owns a white car will know that. Of course, you can have the alternative point of view and say white cars look like they're government issue, particularly if there's something like a Toyota Camry or something like that, but we're talking hot cars with fat wheels and shiny wheels and stuff like that. And silver, of course, you can do a lot with silver cars. I love silver cars. I love silver cars with a couple of coats of clear over the top, and they look just outstanding.
Now with the VK series we also created, or HDT created its own wheel. Peter and I were in the United States for, as I recall, the very first Grand Prix in Detroit. And we were in the car park at the Renaissance Centre, and as we were walking through there with John Rock, who was, as I said earlier, was the marketing director for Holden, we came across a Corvette, and Peter was taken by the wheel. So we walked over and we had a look at the wheel. We looked at, and it was a very intricate casting process that would be required to make the wheel for the Corvette. And Peter said, that is what we're going to do, a variation of that for the VK Group A. And so we took photographs of it, and I've still got those photographs actually, and that's where that wheel started. We came back to Australia, we got with the Holden people. To cut a long story short, they came up with that aero wheel, which we thought was pretty sensational. It was quite costly to develop and to have all the tooling done, but it was just one of those things that sometimes when you're doing special vehicles you just can't always take, well, you don't want to take stuff off the shelf, you want to create it yourself. And that was Peter's mission at the time. He just loved that wheel and said, I'll do a variation of that, which is what we did.
In the mid-1980s, Motor Magazine documented over several issues the design and development of an EFI 6-cylinder VK Commodore. Referred to as Project Bellina, the car featured a 5-speed transmission, the new aero wheels, shield seats and several other modifications, including various engine enhancements.
Project Bellina was a Barry Lake sort of brainchild. He just sort of came up with different things from time to time. They had some sort of project. So you get a car like that 6-pack and fiddle around with it. We couldn't get interested in it, to be honest with you. It was sort of like, good, you know, stick a supercharger on, stick a pump on it or something like that and make it work. But we just sort of did it because we had a lot of bits and pieces we could rate out of the spare parts bin, but no, I couldn't see it happen. Well, later on the VL Turbo came along, was a different deal. You can make something out of that, but the Project Bellina was one guy trying to come up with an idea as opposed to sell a few car mags, but it didn't excite anyone in the realms of Oztech, which incidentally, Oztech, that was our registered company that did all of the R&D and all the research grants and all the bits and pieces that you get involved with when you're developing new cars. And a lot of people don't know the company actually existed, but it existed within that parent organisation of HDT Special Vehicles. Oztech's mission was anything unusual, non-production, the Opel Cadet GSI, the Monza, the Double Z, Gemini, and even the Project Bellina. They were all projects that were undertaken within the organisation by the Oztech branch of things.
By this time, Holden had made the decision to drop the SS name from its product range. Realising its value, HDT adopted the SS and it became the new entry-level vehicle.
Well, when you get a large organisation, people come and go, ideas come and go. And if you've got a new boss, well, obviously new broom sweeps clean, that sort of thing. And so they make some decisions at times that sort of like drop an SS. And we thought we had a lot invested in that nameplate. And a lot of people there reckoned out in the marketplace that SS was a strong brand. So we wanted to keep that. We thought it was a good name. Like an SS Group A became a good nameplate. And of course that allowed you to connect in with the new racing rules and regulations, build your homologation specials, and race on Sunday, sell on Monday.
And I think it was a great decision, a good decision for HDT to take up and run with the SS series. And that proved popular. And as we all know today, the SS came back into the Holden range and is one of their strongest sellers.
Carrying on from the VH, the Group 3 was still the car loaded with the works. But for those wanting something more luxurious, HDT went one step further, releasing the Calais-based Director. Unlike the mainstream models, the Calais Director could be ordered in multiple levels of specification based on the owner's wishes.
One of the other options was the T5 transmission, which was very popular. A lot of people had driven cars with that type of transmission in the past, or limited numbers of people, and we were obviously familiar with it and thought that was a pretty good option for the type of cars we were building.
I knew the customers would love them if we could get them on the car. And I knew that one of the issues when I was driving it was that, gee, I wish I had fifth gear, because the car would pull it and get good economy and nice and quiet on highway and stuff like that. So I was actually watching the Detroit Grand Prix from the GM corporate suite outside the Renaissance Centre in Detroit, downtown Detroit. And it so happened, one of the guys I was talking to was the chief shebang of Paul Warner. And he's saying, "Hello, Peter, what are you doing?" I'm telling him all this stuff, and yeah, we might have something for you. So he gave me his business card. And I thought, oh, he's just some guy from there. So the next morning, I've gone back to a friend's place, I was staying there, and I rang this guy, talked to him, and he said, yeah, hell yeah. He said, so he made me the Australian agent for Borg Warner's T5 gears. Can you believe that? So I got some gearboxes sent out. I got 6 sent out to do some engineering development work. Fiddled around and got them to fit and everything else, and clutch levers and forks and everything, and we got it right. Put them in the car, and we started doing it as an option. And people loved them, but they were concerned that they mightn't have the longevity. Again, I guaranteed it. So we therefore got a bit of case history, and well, then Holden took it on as their own. And at that stage, unfortunately, I lost the exclusive contract to bring all those gearboxes in. But the first run of homologation specials using the 5-speed gearbox, General Motors bought off Peter Brock. How about that? Doesn't happen too often. I don't think I made much out of it. It was a pretty skinny margin.
The VK Group 3 was basically a carryover from the previous model, and which had been a huge success, and we saw no reason to change that. It had some added modifications and performance.
The involvement of the Group 3 was based on, I guess, the fact that it was seen to be a really good collectible, and that we could afford to go upmarket a little with very good sound systems, graphic equaliser and better trim, and even to the extent where when we built the Group 3s, and then in the VK particularly, and we built another 50 Group A Group 3s, we actually had a more refined suspension in those cars, which was squashy, and it really was, I think that was probably one of the nicest cars we built, to be honest with you. It was a bit like the Directors. Same sort of mechanical spec, probably the same sort of luxury spec, but it was within the context of a car which had lacked perhaps the sound deadening qualities of a Calais-based car.
The VK Director was another popular model. The concept there was to build the base car with certain features. However, if the customer wished, he could add various other features to the car, including the full body kit and a whole lot of other features. However, if that didn't appeal to some people, you could have it without those features, and basically build the car as you wanted it. And that was the basis for the VK Director, which proved reasonably successful.
The breed of car was getting meaner and meaner, And the options of what I believe what you could get from HDT was, hey, build your own car. And these were awesome cars at the time.
The reason we had such a huge range in options was based on customer feedback. Customers made it very obvious to me that they didn't all want to be showing that they had all this hot car. They wanted Q cars. They wanted understated cars. They wanted cars that they could get out there and they could give some guy in a Porsche or a Merc, a run for their money, but they weren't shouting it out. So they wanted understated cars, and we thought, yeah, I'd rather enjoy driving cars like it myself quite often. So that was fine. So we started off and said, well, okay, you don't have to have a body kit. But here's what you have to do as a mandatory basic package in order to get a bill plate or to get a signature on the car. And that's where we started off from. And so they were always high-spec cars, but they might not necessarily have had the external visual impact, because some people do like that, some people don't.
The Group A name is most commonly associated with the SS Group A and its striking Formula Blue paint job, but the Group A name was actually first used in the form of the SL Group A. The name was then later revived for the homologation Special SS Group A, which required a minimum build of 500 cars. But in actual fact, a slight error with ordering meant that 502 vehicles would be produced.
Well, that was the dealer pack. That's what it was. It was an ADP. I just had this bright idea one day, why don't you call it Group A? Because we were going Group A. Group A, let's call it Group A. So we did a Group A, and very soon on, after that, negotiations began, and perhaps a seed was planted that we should build a race homologation series and we should call the Group A. So we just let that quietly drop and then, regurgitated it out there with the Group A such. I don't know how many cars were built as Group A's, but 20, 50, I don't know. But that's how it happened, and it was like it's too good an idea to be spending it on these cars over here. Let's build a whole production run of cars. That's how it worked. So the Group A blue car, well, I wanted that blue colour. I wanted a blue colour. But the only interior colour that Holden could give us was the cerulean colour, and it had a lot of green in it. So we had to add a lot of green to that blue colour to turn it into what became Formula Blue. We kept on adding green until it started looking right and with the interior. That's why it was that colour. We had to make it so that, they all talk to each other. And then we had silver wheels. And I thought, I want this car to have white wheels. I want white wheels. So we've got the boys in the paint shop. We painted up some white wheels and stuck them in the car. So, that looks hot. That looks like a Norm Beachy car from, back when I was a kid, just watching this whole stuff involved with Norm and his PK751's PK752 cars, but Neptune blue with the white wheels. And that was I just wanted it to look like that. But I took it down to Ross McKenzie. And I said, Ross, who was the Director of Sales and Marketing today, in this era, he was the sales manager in those days. He said, a bit over the top. Cheers, PB. Don't know, a bit over the top. I said, okay, let's do a compromise. Let's make them optional. He said, okay, optional.
Even up to the VKs, and before we were doing the white wheels on the blue cars, and almost no one put white wheels on a blue car back in those days.
Group A required the manufacturer of the core vehicle, i.e. Holden in this case, to homologate the base car, which was a huge job in terms of paperwork and photographing and so on, and submit that to the FIA, which we did for 1985. Following that, you could then have an evolution car, which was the first VK Group A. The VK Group A was the very first evolution car for Holden, but also the first in the world. And we had developed all of the requirements that we believed were necessary for Group A racing, and it was a huge improvement on the 1985 car, I can tell you.
For us, it was a fairly major enterprise because our economies of scale were nothing like, say, the BMW M3. They were developing the same thing. They might have a production run of hundreds of thousands of vehicles. I don't even know the numbers. But I can tell you that we had to do it in the context of a production run of, say, 20 or 30,000 cars.
In terms of engine improvements, which were aimed essentially at what was required for motor racing, had the red block, which had some modifications done in the foundry to give it a little bit more strength in a couple of areas. I think I recall around the rear main bearing area. We also, for the first time, used roller rockers, which was something that was required for the higher RPM that we would use in the engine. Air intake system was not totally free, but we could modify that. So in all, it was an excellent package that Holden engineers and HDT engineers came up with in the parameters of building 500 cars that had to be sold, registered and pass all the ADRs that were required at the time.
Well, the engine development was in small incremental amounts really, but there was one that was critical to the success of the car on the racetrack, and that was reducing the engine capacity from 5,030 odd cc back to 4,990, and that meant a small production change of remachining the crankshaft just a few thou to reduce the stroke, and that also coincided with lowering the compression ratio slightly because of the different quality fuels. So it worked in pretty well. We could take something like 75 kilos out of our race cars and for no appreciable change in performance.
We made a decal that fitted on the air cleaner which says 4.9 litres, and the reason I mention that is that there was a curious decision made in a court in South Australia whereby a customer had bought a car which had been sold to him as the 5 litre car, and he then complained to the dealer that it wasn't a 5 litre car, it was actually 4.9, because that's what the decal said, which was humbug in terms of what was the difference? I mean, all car companies do that. And so it went to court, and the judge found in favour of the owner, and the dealer had to pay compensation.
The Group A also featured a unique camshaft of HDT's design, which was supplied and manufactured by Crane Cams, who also supplied the roller rockers. These, combined with various other engine enhancements, saw the power figures increase from the 177 kilowatt previously seen in the SS and Group 3 to an impressive 196 kilowatt.
So the guy from Crane Cams, who manufactured all those Holden cams to our specifications, because we had our own interface with their organisation, which I must admit eventually turned around, and that was a difficulty for us because we had a lot of warranty claims on the early production one of those cars, which I had to rectify, and that was caused by the fact that the camshafts were taken out of the boxes as they arrived, and they weren't cleaned sufficiently with spirits, etc., put into the cars, and because this area was dirty, it actually caused a wear factor on those lobes, and the lobes wore instantaneously like that before they actually they surface hardened, and they got into a reliable sort of mode, which most camshafts do. So the initial startup causes the problems. Until we rectified that, we had like literally 3/4 of those cars with worn camshafts, and they'd done they'd done delivery kilometres only. We fixed it, but it was difficult. Did it go much faster than stock? Well, a little. But the engine was designed so that when you modified that car and stuck it into that motor racing field, it was going to be a pretty good car. It was lightweight, high lift cam, breathed pretty well.
When we were building the VK Group A, the problem we came up with was getting it done in the time frame, and we actually were disallowed the use of it the following year, which I guess we were a bit upset by, because we did finish building them within the year, but we weren't permitted homologation. So the cars were out there and they were beautiful to drive, and I think people loved them. They were they were a bit of a beast in a way, weren't they? I mean, some of the refinements came later, but that car was an incredible car.
Having done all the work, homologated the base car, Peter and I raced in 1985 the base car. Now, the engine was basically standard. There were a couple of modifications required with air intake and so on, and I can tell you that the cars that Peter and I drove to Bathurst that year in 85, like to and from Bathurst, were faster than the cars that we raced. Now, okay, lap speeds with you're allowed slick tyres, obviously, and race tyres and so on, and things like that, but there was no aerodynamics on the car, standard engine, And we often chuckled to ourselves when we talked about it years later that the cars that we drove to and from Bathurst were faster than the cars we raced.
Released in 1986, the VL range saw a change from the more aggressive styling of the VK to a much smoother and refined appearance, which was also carried to the interior of the vehicles. The introduction of unleaded fuel to Australia saw a joint venture between Holden and Nissan to develop the EFI 3-litre engine, which was initially the only engine available in the VL range. A potent turbocharged version was later released with the new unleaded V8 to follow.
For the start of VL range, we didn't have a V8. However, Holden had the very popular and powerful 6-cylinder range. So we did the Calais-based LE with the 3-litre engine, and also the SL and Bellina-based cars called the Corsa. They were quite popular. However, we were a V8 company, no question about that. We'd had other variations, but basically we were a V8 company, and whilst the range of 6 cylinders were popular, and particularly the turbo car, we were waiting anxiously for the next V8 model to get our teeth into.
Yeah, the LE was, I suppose you could call it an interim car because it was based on the Turbo 6, but very refined, and I think that the bodywork on that car was just fabulous. I just forget how we did it, but that was after the Leo Prino era, and I think it was from MacArthur Fiberglass. We worked in very closely with him over in Dandenong, and it was, I thought it was a sharp looking car. It was classy, Momo wheels, nice height, integrated, it looked right, looked neat, and it went okay. It was quite a snappy sort of car. It was probably close to the performance of some of our other cars. And again, we rated the spare parts bin to a large degree. We had the knowledge and understanding about suspension, spring shock, stuff like that. So it came up because we were waiting to get Holden to build the V8. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that Holden had, without any consultation with people like myself, decided not to have any more V8s. Finito. All over at Red Rover, no more V8s. So they said, if you want a V8, you better build a prototype so we can take it out the outback. But we're not going to do it because we don't think the market will sustain it. And at any rate, the V8 will not fit in the chassis, the VL chassis. I said, if you want to do it, Peter, I remember Ray Barrett and those people talking to me, you've got to do it, you've got to build a car. So I said, okay. So we got a car sent out, a VL, some sort of 6-pack, Then I rang up, and look, they told me that this was going to take 6 months, some hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it was going to take a huge amount of money to build a prototype. Well, they sent a car out to us. I remember, I can see it in my mind right now where it sat in this little cubby hole in Chetwood Street, North Melbourne. And we ripped the engine and gearbox out. We rang up Holden Parts and Accessories. We had an engine sent out, a spare parts engine, a black engine, painted black, sent out, and we put a T5 gearbox behind it with a clutch housing, etc. And it got a V8 radiator, and whatever it was, and we stuck it up under this car. And they said, you cannot fit that engine gearbox. It won't fit in there. So we looked at it, and sure enough, the clutch fork would hit the floor because they'd shrunk it all down to try and get a larger interior sort of space. And they hadn't cared about the V8. I mean, they were talking a small amount, that's what they'd done. And of course, there was cat converters on this car too. So that was all different shaped floor pan. And to overcome that, I thought, why don't we just drop the back of the gearbox down? So I got some spaces and dropped the rear crossmember down. I think it was 10 mil, maybe it was 15. I don't think it was more than that. Dropped it down that much, which meant the clutch fork actually cleared the floor instead of just hitting it. Because they said, we're not going to hit every car. We're not going to do it, but you are not allowed to touch that floor pan. So I did all that, and then spaced down the tail shaft to suit, and we duly sent the car out there. It cost me a total of $20,000. It took 1 weekend's work, and it went out there, as distinct from hundreds of thousands of dollars and 6 engineers and 6 months and whatever it was. 1 weekend, couple of blokes, 20 grand, there it is. Went out to the outback and did its hot weather testing. It came through like in flying colours. We put a cat converter in there, we did everything, and away we went. It was no big deal.
We did Holden's research and development too, you know, if they wanted something done, like for instance the unleaded V8. We developed the unleaded V8 in the race team as part of special vehicles, and when we got it running properly, we sent the specs back to Holden and they would do it. So we were very much a branch of their R&D area as well, their engineering department.
So then Holden said, we can now build you some V8s. So they started scheduling to build some V8s. They weren't going to do it. The foundry was down there. People weren't happy about this, but sometimes they make these decisions in large organisations. You can never find out who they were, but someone struck probably a bean counter. No petrol in the veins. You've got dollars, going through their head. So the car got finally into production, and of course that became the VL Group A, etc., and of course V8s then went up again. But I went through a few periods of time where there were no V8s, and if you want it to happen, Peter, you better get off your butt and make it happen. So I had to do that. Cars to me are an art form, and therefore you've got to treat it like that. You've got to let people love the whole idea of doing it. If you see cars as just a means of making money, and you don't really care about the specs, all your hope is that the customer will buy enough of them, I think you lose the plot. I think you start going backwards.
Another very important car was the VL Group A, I guess you could say Mark II for HDT, which had some minor, modifications compared to the first one, which included the 5-speed transmission, some modification to the differential. The air intake system was different, which in itself created a little problem. The polariser had to be shifted from its central location on all previous cars to the left to make way for the air induction system. And when I say it created some problems, the cars with the polariser fitted were known as the Plus Pack. The other cars which didn't have the polariser fitted were just a normal Group A, and that created some confusion in dealer land and with customers, which is unfortunate, but it was sorted out in the end.
When we were building the homologation cars, we would source the componentry, which might be seats or they might be door trims, steering wheels, engine components, and most of those we would actually provide to the line, and they would come to us partially complete. We would fit body components, I think. Certainly we didn't do internal engine stuff, like roller rockers were fitted because we sourced them, supplied them to Holden, and they did the run. I don't think we could have coped with the manpower we had. We would have had to expand our factory quite a bit. I think we had about 50 people actually involved in the production, going right through from trim to mechanical componentry, tyres and wheels refit and all of that.
The VL Group A featured a striking permanent red paint job and carried over many of the styling cues from the previous Group A, such as large rear boot spoiler and deep front air dam. The cars also featured a new Nacker-styled air duct on the bonnet, complemented by a revised induction system.
We knew there was a high pressure area at the base of the windshield, and with that body shape, that if we could actually put an air box back into there, it'd get clean air not under pressure, but it was very much, at least atmospheric pressure, maybe better. And if you had a cold air intake, etc., really working, that car would give you some really good installed horsepower, both on the racetrack and on the road.
We used to road test these cars. We had a G meter that we put on the transmission tunnel in the back seat, and we go around Fisherman's Bend or around that whole area there, Port Melbourne, and just test what sort of Gs we could actually generate with these cars. And we didn't have very harsh springs, and they weren't sitting dead flat. There was a little bit of body movement. The polariser came into it for that reason, that the harshness, I guess the road, the vibration coming through from the road, all of those things were just a problem in the Holden. And the polariser was there to try and help dampen that vibration in the car, so that when you're feeling inside the car driving, it was just a lot smoother. reducing the tyre pressure to 22 psi was another thing that needed to happen to do that.
We weren't even fitting the polarisers in the body area, and the mechanics weren't either. That was sort of Paul Gustafson's area and David Whitehead's area. They'd sort of sneak the cars out the back and bolt them on when no one was looking and put the sticker on the back window. And everybody was worried that we'd never get the Group A's done, because we ended up having something like 14 weeks before the homologation date. So prior to that, Peter said, okay, we'll buy a bonnet, we'll buy a boot lid, or get hold of a bonnet or a boot lid, whichever, I don't know if they bought them or not. But then we had all the fiberglass bits there, so we had a brand new VL bonnet, brand new VL boot lid, so just pre-fit the boot lid spoilers, pre-fit the bonnet scoops, and we had about 350 kits painted,
ready to go
as soon as the cars rocked in. So between four of us at that stage on two hoists, we were building up in the order of 22 cars a day, because they came from GM already with the 5-speeds in them, already with the engines in them, already with the momos on them. All we basically had to do was put a rear bumper, side moulds, and the front bumper air dam and a boot lid spoiler, but that was all pre-fitted, so it was just a matter of, right, I know this is going to fit, bang, on you go. So again, that enabled us to start getting up to the area of, from the VCs doing one a day to, when it came to the VLs, we're doing 22, but that's the difference also in having the availability or the possibility of being able to pre-fit all of that stuff. And like I said, we had about 350 painted front air dams, rear wings and bonnet scoops before we saw the first car.
It was a great job by the team at HDT. I mean, 500 cars in a very short space of time. I'm talking, I think it was less than 6 months. And all the coordination that has to take place to coordinate all of the suppliers, all the parts, get the cars out to the dealers on time. And there may have been a few little hiccups along the way, but they were very minor. But I remember we had a celebration at the end of the build. We stayed back one Friday night and had a few drinks and celebrated that, because it was a huge effort. And that's the one thing I do remember about that car. And that impressed Holden too. I mean, we've been in business for a little while at this time, but to do that sort of job in that space of time, coordinate the whole thing, was just absolutely fantastic effort on our staff, and I was certainly impressed, and I know Peter was too.
But I think the interesting thing about our cars, bearing in mind the economic climate then, was that if a Holden dealer received a Brock Commodore, that Brock Commodore sold for the full retail price, no discounts. I mean, you go to a Holden dealer today, you can always get $5,000 off or something, can't you? I mean, that's how it is. Back then, you could do that with a standard Holden car, but you couldn't do it with a Brock Commodore. Every Brock Commodore, they got full retail. So the dealers loved them, because people saw the value, and they'd held the value too, in the same way.
I don't know, I think we built some of our best cars in that era, and I think we were smarter in that era. I think we knew more about graphics, marketing, presentation. We had dealer presentations for the cars. We got them out to drive them all, and they'd go away raving, saying, I want 6, I want 8, I want 10, you know, and say the order books were full before they got on the plane to go home that night.
Apart from the Group A, Corsa and LE, over time there would be many more new models in the HDT lineup, as well as some features never before seen in a Holden.
The Aero, I just love the body kit, you know, and we never got to the chance of really refining that body kit. It wasn't easy to build, I'll tell you, because I remember the first one we built, the guy putting it together was going, I can't believe it, how can you do this, you know? Because I remember Peter saying there was a Toyota, this might sound a bit strange, but the flares around the Toyota four-wheel drives that were coming out then, they really looked nice. The way they were a bit bulky, and they came out and wrapped around the wheel. And he said, I want to work on that sort of idea, you know. And of course they were doing it with pressed metal, and we were just adding on a fiberglass bit. So not very easy to build, you know. But I thought beautiful cars. I really did love the Aero.
Although not a HDT plated car, the Nitron, with its unique brigade red paintwork, still featured parts supplied and fitted by HDT special vehicles.
The Nitron, that was just a combination of a few of the old bits and pieces and a sticker basically, but I suppose it was to a degree badge engineering. You could do a tiny bit to a Commodore and still call it HDT improved in some ways.
The designer series was a forerunner of what we see today. I mean, that was the ability of someone to take bits and pieces, a dealer to take bits and pieces and turn them into something very different. So the designer series was based on the set of select componentry, which has morphed into this era as being something like the Holden by design. That's what it is. The Sport series was the same. We just took a normal car and added a sport kit to it, and dealers loved it fabulously.
Other models in the lineup included the one-off Mount Panorama, the Sandown, Bathurst and Bathurst Aero, to name a few. But the VL Group 3 was one of the familiar names still carrying on.
The VL Group 3, that was a beautiful car, I thought. I mean, it was a great pity that the Group 3 that we made after the split didn't become, I guess, mass-produced, you know. It was really unfortunate because it was a superb vehicle. I don't know how many we built even. I saw a few go out, but it would have been fabulous to see them become mass production items.
In 1986, HDT were also working on another project with something completely new: independent rear suspension. 2 LE kitted cars were built, and one of them, dubbed World Test Director, would be flown overseas and pitted against some of the finest automotive machinery each country had to offer.
The World Car trip that happened that went to the United States, it also went to Europe, but the United States was one which offered a great economic opportunity in our mind. I mean, we were really excited by that because it was a Calais Director with an LE kit, and it had IRS. It had a polariser on it. It was a beautiful handling car. And the intention was that the polariser was a part of that it would help make a car quiet, responsive, powerful, and just smooth to drive, just stick on the road, you know, without the harsh feeling that you get in a race car or a car that's got very short spring rates, things like that. The interesting thing that happened there was that the GM dealers in the United States then were very excited by it because Peter already had a strong contact with them, and they came and drove this car and said, we had, I don't know, you can call them an advance order, but a letter of intent saying, I think we were totaling 5,000 cars, something like that. We were very keen that we could do this. And the problem arose, firstly, that Holden weren't keen to deal with us, although at that time it probably would have been okay if they'd been allowed. I mean, at the moment they're exporting Monaros back into the States, and that could have happened then. The problem arose from head office in Detroit that they didn't want one of their subsidiaries exporting into their own market, and I guess which affected them and affected their dealer network. But for us it was fabulous. I mean, we just thought, hey, we can do this, you know, we can build 5,000 cars, ship them to the States, and it would have worked great.
The production version of the Director with its huge 21-piece body kit and IRS was first unveiled to the public on the 20th of February 1987, with the ice green Director being put on show. Ultimately, only a small handful of these cars would be produced, and not all with IRS. Sadly, the release of this car would eventually lead to the demise of the Holden-Brock partnership.
The whole idea with the Director was to make a statement. It was to say, we can build cars that are as good as cars from anywhere in the world. And we wanted to set standards that meant this was a flagship car. If we could create a better car by changing its visual impact, or coming up with an engine or a suspension setup that was going to give it some sort of level of sophistication and perceived value, plus actually delivered performance, we would do it. Consequently, we embarked upon developing the engines. We had a lot of work going into suspension, particularly the independent rear suspension. And we started looking at increased wheels and tyres and things like that. We're running 245s on 16 by 8s in the front, 16 by 9s in the back, some of those cars. They're big by today's standards. 225 in the front, 245 in the rear. They weren't shabby. They worked.
The Director was another interesting car. I didn't have a lot of involvement in it, apart from the fact that Peter had the base model, and whilst the mechanical specs had been finalised, I think, at this point, the styling was the key to this car, and Peter took a personal interest in it. I might add that Peter was quite artistic and had a good feel for styling and shapes and things like that, and had spent a lot of time with Leo Pruneau, who was Holden stylist and had a lot of experience worldwide. They got on well together and sort of spoke the same language, and I think Peter wanted to have a shot at this himself. And from what I could see of where he was going, I was pretty impressed with what he was doing. There was one area, though, I do recall that he had a little bit of a problem with. And when I say a problem, he was just a little bit undecided which way to go, and that was the rear wing. And I'd looked at the overall styling buck that was there, and it was all in shape, maybe unpainted at that point, but it looked pretty good. And but it's one thing having a look at a styling buck; it's another thing when you see the complete car in the light of day, and we hadn't got to that point at this stage. But however, I'd noticed a photograph of a Lancia Stratos rally car, which had for the time, a most unusual shaped rear wing. Or I felt it was reasonably unusual, but also, whilst it had a practical purpose, it certainly looked quite good. And so I showed the photograph to Peter in a magazine. He said, "Boy, that's nice." But a slight variation of that was developed, and in the end, I thought it was still a little bit. It was just a little bit strong for the rest of the styling of the car. It just needed softening a little bit. But anyway, that was just my opinion, and I wasn't totally opposed to the shape of the wing. But I think the styling of the director had a bit going for it. I liked it.
We have to do a whole lot of other things to, like the director body kits. You'd spend 2 days putting one of them on, and gee whiz, a nightmare trying to make exhaust fits through the wings in.
I remember coming around the workshop and working on it, and it was just a nightmare. I'm going, look at it, it's just like acres of fiberglass on the floor, little tiny widgy little bits. Where the hell's that going? Up there, and this bit goes down, and just, wow, mate.
For the over the roof section, it was mandatory. The only way you could bolt that on was also removing the rear window and removing some of the rear interior trim, because you had to run your brake light cable up there, and you had to make that waterproof, because once you put a hole in a roof, you don't want people, hang on, I've got a watermark on my headlining. So you had to make sure that was fitted properly, and it probably took near on a day just to fit the over the roof section. The rest of the body kit, apart from the top guard panels front and rear, the rest of it was pretty much standard, even though it was larger, and you were dealing with different gaps and different weights hanging out even further, and different leverage points. And if you wanted the thing to last, it had to be obviously spend a lot more time on to making sure it was secure and it wasn't going to come off at any time that you might have accidentally knocked a speed bump or something like that. You don't want to leave half your body kit behind, so that's something I was always conscious of, and always just I think it took me about 2 days to build my first director, and I got that down to about a day and a half at the end. But they were a very busy body kit to fit, because all the interior door trims had come off. As I say, the rear window had come out, all the external mouldings would come off, and the car was basically like, I imagine some people might have thought if they'd walked in and seen their cars and think, hang on, that's my brand new car. Do you know how to put this thing back together? No, it's all right. It'll be fine. By the time we finished, it'll look lovely.
We thought it was a pretty straightforward exercise, to be frank with you, to fit an independent rear end in a Commodore. It sort of fitted, and a bit of fiddling here and fudging there. It was we made up some jigs and we got it to fit in. We spent a bit of time getting it at the right angles, etc. under the car. We just sort of sat down and figured it out, that was about what the angle it all should be running through. We looked at ride heights and where we wanted the roll centre to be, etc. and we sort of just got that right. What we thought was pretty good. A lot of it's instinctive stuff. A lot of my whole suspension stuff's been instinctive. You can put it in and you see what it feels like under your bum. Does this car feel right? If not, you change something. I mean, one of the things we had to do, for instance, we had to change the feel of the front suspension to make it match the back. And that's something Holden had never done. So they had trouble getting the independent rear end to work, because they just looked at the rear end and not at integrating the car. So one of the things we did at the front was to change the height of the rack to give it different bump steer characteristic. And that gave it the ability of going into a corner and giving the driver a bit of feel, a bit of feedback, so that the rear and the front of the car talked to each other. So you as a driver, when you went in there, it felt more linear. You turned in, you felt it tip into a corner, and it would start off with a trace of understeer and maybe finish up with a trace of oversteer, but it wouldn't turn around and bite you.
The car was a beautiful handling car, and I think what really excited Peter was that independent rear suspension, because it made the car, it transformed the handling. And when we started to put it into a couple of cars, and that was happening in the R&D department inside the workshop, there were a couple of mechanics there who were very capable of interpreting Peter's vision into a physical reality, because that's the hard thing, right? You can envisage something, but how do you materialise it? And Peter picked people who could do that. He wouldn't use those people on the production line. He used them because he could go there and say, look, I want to fit this thing, how do we do it? And I watched it being built, and it was, I don't profess to have that ability, but I can say when I got in the car and drove it, it was just superb, and it worked straight away. There wasn't even any suspension bits crunching and hitting body parts, and it didn't happen like that. It was fantastic. Really groundbreaking, I think. It was something that probably would be hard for the major manufacturers to achieve that. They probably don't have the independence of thought, or maybe the committees are too big, I'm not sure, But for the big plus of having a company which was owned and directed by one person is he could really do what he wanted, which meant he could say, well, heck, we can try this. And there were things that didn't work. Body styling that wasn't accepted, didn't make it. There were wheels that were tried and thrown, got rid of, and all sorts of things. But things like those major engineering things, I think it was Henry Ford who said, wasn't it? I want a V8. You make it. And the engineering guy said, no, you can't have it. V8s can't be built. And he just insisted you can do it. And in the end he got his way. Well, it was very similar to that, okay? If it was a vision that was appeared practical and it could happen, it did get materialised, and it was amazing to see it happen because it would happen fast. I mean, within a week, there was a Holden with an IRS in it, fantastic.
Fast car, yeah, that was a very fast car, that ice cream director. It was just a blueprinted engine. Everyone thought we built special bits. It wasn't. It was just, we put it together properly. We put the car together as a car which could go around the world and take on others, and a back-to-back test situation. And it was fast. I mean, a 5-speed gearbox. I think the thing did 150 something mile per hour, which in that era is like, that's not slow. It was a quick car, and there was no real secrets to it. It's just that we built our own car in house and we put it together properly, and we just blueprinted it like you would if you were going to ensure that you built the very best. We hadn't gone into that really prior to that. So it was a lovely car, that, and it did become famous because Wheels used that as a press test car, and they came up with some comments on that which were extraordinarily positive and supportive of what HDT could do. So I think people removed the rego number and said, oh, that's a good car, hang on to that one.
I mean, I ended up driving this thing. I remember going on a holiday. It was a white director with a full aero body kit with a tow bar. And I put my little aluminium boat on the back, had a full IRS. That car started life as a 6-cylinder, just a runabout really, with this, the Nissan 6. And then it became maybe a Corsa. Then it had a V8 in it. Then it had the independent rear suspension in it. And then by the time I got it, it had the body kit. And here's me going down to Port Fairy to run a boat out in the bay there with this incredible vehicle that no one could believe. I mean, a remarkable vehicle. But it was like that there, something would start life in one form and get transformed.
So we got that car working pretty good, and I said, okay, well, let's use it as an option. And it did create some waves, I must admit, because the more that GM were having trouble getting it in production, the more I was sort of promoting it, the rift got greater and greater. And eventually you sort of had to sit back and say, well, what should we do? Should we not do it because it's going to make the factory feel better, or should we sort of say, look, this is a good thing and it's going to enable people to see this as a viable alternative to some of the, particularly West German imports? And I chose the latter because I loved Holden so much. I wanted it to be out there seen in that manner, and so did the dealers, of course. So that's why we sort of pressed on with it, and why we got it to work well, and I guess why it finished up as high profile a situation as what it did.
When the split happened with Holden, then that occurred in the context of a release of the director, okay? And the engineering issue was, I guess their major engineering issue was probably the IRS, but there was also mentions about the polarizer and what was this thing. The instruction from Holden was to not release the director on this particular date, which I think was February 20th, 1987, a fateful day.
We knew the GM was going to pull the pin that night. Like, we knew the GM had said, okay, you release that car tonight.
And you're gone.
At Kooyong. That's it, we're pulling the pin. But of course, for whatever reason, Brock didn't necessarily think that was actually going to happen. But in the end it did.
Peter had no intention of not releasing it. I mean, for him, that was his decision. It was his car. It was the best car he'd ever built. So he wanted people to have the benefit of it. And that was entirely how he saw it.
With IRS, I remember Peter Robinson, the editor of Wheels magazine, saying, after driving one of these new cars at Brock's, I find it hard to believe that all Holdens should be built with independent rear suspensions. And that probably was not a very wise thing, because it did provoke some responses within Holden that turn around and bit me. There's no doubt about that, because they don't like it if the tail starts wagging the dog, and that's understandable.
The economic threat was that you are no longer our trading partner, and in the end that's their right, and it always was their right. And then on Peter's part, it's his right to stand on what he believed was the best car he'd ever built, and that really became a difference which is irreconcilable, and it was irreconcilable. So from our point of view, we needed to proceed on from there with what we believed was the right thing to do, which was to bring this car out. Unfortunately, inside the company, all of the directors and managers of the company walked out, except me.
With ties between Holden and Brock now severed, and HDT without a car manufacturer to supply them with base model cars to enhance, times got tough for Brock and the team, and would eventually leave Brock with no choice but to end HDT Brock Special Vehicles as we knew it.
We had quite a lot of business that we had ordered, and Holden had to let that go through. When that dried up, we had a problem with supply of cars. We had a tremendous demand, but we had no dealer really wanting us to sell us cars. So we had a bloke working for us called Peter McFarlane. We'd send him up to New South Wales to go buy half a dozen base cars from some dealer who maybe didn't know who he was, right? And then bring the car back down, and we'd convert them and sell them privately. The problem was that Holden said, well, you're modifying our vehicle, we're not going to warrant the whole car. That probably could never have stood up in a court of law, but it certainly put the wind up enough people for the source to dry up. I think the dealers were probably concerned that it put their relationship with Holden under threat, and they weren't prepared to risk that. Even though they could make a lot more money selling our cars than theirs, they still felt that it wasn't worth the risk. It was a challenge. I must say with Peter, he just said, the money will come, up to the point where we decided we'd quit, and there's a point where you do that. Nobody ever missed out on getting paid, We all made financial commitments like mortgaging our houses, that sort of thing, or putting it up as security, okay? But at the end of it, when we wound it up, nobody lost money, and no bills went unpaid. And that was fantastic that it happened that way. I mean, Peter had a great faith in that. He just believed that the money would come, that we were doing the right thing, and if we had to shut it, we shut it. That's what happened. It did shut, but we survived through... we actually put out some good cars, didn't we? When you think of it. It would have been great if we could have manufactured more of them, but it wasn't to be.
There's no doubt that Peter Brock and HDT Special Vehicles have changed the Australian performance car scene forever. The last 25 years has seen the production of some of Australia's greatest muscle cars, which have now become an array of true collectibles. Thank you for being a part of our journey, looking back over those 25 years since one man's bright idea.